The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in floating chairs, their eyes fixed on the massive holographic display at the center. Today, they would witness the end of another species. Elder Ben was the oldest member of the council. He had lived for 9,000 years and had recorded the rise and fall of 47 civilizations. His pale blue skin was wrinkled like old paper, and his 4 eyes had seen more death than any living creature should. He activated his recording device and prepared to document another extinction. The display showed a small blue planet, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Earth, home to a young species called humans. They had only discovered space travel 200 years ago. They were children compared to the ancient races of the galaxy. Admiral Koro of the Velthari Empire stood before the council. He was 12 feet tall, covered in black armor that seemed to absorb light itself. The Velthari were the most feared warriors in the known universe. They had conquered 17 worlds and had never lost a single war. No. The humans have refused our demands, Koro said. His voice was deep and cold, like stones grinding together. They will not surrender their mining colonies in the outer belt. They have chosen death. A murmur went through the council. Some felt pity. Others felt nothing at all. Elderben raised one of his thin hands. Admiral, how long do you estimate the conflict will last? Koro made a sound that might have been laughter. Our fleet numbers 12,000 warships. The humans have fewer than 300 vessels capable of combat. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Their armor cannot stop our guns. I estimate complete victory within 72 standard hours. Council's great computer began its calculations. This machine had predicted the outcome of 9,847 wars throughout galactic history. It had never been wrong. Numbers and data flowed across the display. Population counts, military strength, industrial capacity, psychological profiles. The result appeared in glowing letters that all species could read. Prediction: total human extinction. Estimated time: 72 standard hours. Elder Ben recorded the prediction with a heavy heart. He had studied the humans briefly. They were strange creatures, emotional, irrational. They waged war against each other constantly. It also created beautiful art and music. They destroyed their own planet while dreaming of the stars. They were full of contradictions. It was almost sad that they would soon be gone, far across the galaxy. On the blue planet called Earth, a woman named Park Geo stood in a dark room filled with screens and worried faces. She was 41 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes that had not closed in 3 days. She was the commander of Earth's United Defense Force. The first woman to ever hold that position. Around her stood the leaders of every nation on presidents, prime ministers, generals, kings. They had all come together because they had no other choice. An enemy from the stars had come to destroy them all. A young officer approached her with a tablet. Commander, we have received their final message. Geo took the tablet and read the words on the screen. The Velthari were offering one last chance. Surrender all colonies. Give up all weapons. Accept permanent supervision by the Empire. In return, humanity would be allowed to live as servants. The room was silent. Everyone was looking at her. President Quan of the Eastern Alliance spoke first. Commander Park? Perhaps we should consider... No. Jiho's voice was quiet but firm. She looked around the room at the frightened faces of the most powerful people on Earth. I have read the reports about the Velthari. I know what they do to the species they conquer. Slavery, experiments, slow extinction over generations. They do not want us to live. They want us to die slowly while serving them. But if we fight, we will definitely die, said another leader. Their fleet is impossible to defeat. The numbers, I do not care about numbers, Geo said. She walked to the center of the room where a holographic map of Earth floated in the air. My grandmother survived the Great War. My mother survived the famine. My father survived the plague. For thousands of years, people have told my ancestors that they would die, that they should give up. That survival was impossible. She turned to face them all. "We are still here." She picked up her communicator and opened a channel to the Velthari fleet. Admiral Koro's dark face appeared on every screen in the room. Human Commander Koro said, "I assume you have come to accept our generous terms?" "I have come to give you our answer," Geo replied. She spoke one word. Then she ended the transmission. The room erupted in chaos. Leaders shouted at each other. Some demanded that she be removed from command. Others wept openly. But Geo remained calm. She had made her decision. Now she had to prepare her people for war. In the council chamber, Elderbin watched the human commander's response with surprise. The computer had predicted that the humans would attempt to negotiate for at least 12 hours before refusing. They would beg. They would plead. They would offer compromises. Instead, this woman had simply said no. He noted this as a small anomaly in his records. It meant nothing, of course. The humans would still be destroyed. But it was interesting. Most species facing certain death showed fear. This human showed something else. Was it courage? Stupidity? Or something that Elderbin, with all his 9,000 years of life, had never encountered before? Admiral Koro gave the order. The Velthari fleet moved toward Earth. 12,000 warships carrying millions of soldiers. Each one trained from birth to kill. They had conquered species far more advanced than humanity. They had destroyed civilizations that had existed for 10,000 years. These soft, fragile humans would not survive the first day. On Earth, Commander Park Geo gathered her officers. They had 72 hours before the enemy arrived. 72 hours to prepare the entire planet for a war they could not win. "We cannot match their weapons," she told them. "We cannot match their numbers. We cannot match their experience. So we will not try to match them. We will be something they have never faced before. We will be humans." She began to give orders. Evacuation plans. Defense positions. Communication networks. Weapon distribution. Every person on Earth who could hold a rifle would be given one. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, Elderbin closed his recording device. There was nothing more to document. In 72 hours, he would simply note the date of humanity's extinction and move on to the next matter. He had no way of knowing that everything was about to change. The Velthari fleet arrived like a black tide. Thousands of warships blocked out the stars as they surrounded Earth, their weapons powered up with a deep hum that could be heard even in the vacuum of space. On the planet below, billions of humans looked up at the sky and saw their death approaching. Captain Yoon, Taiwu stood on the bridge of the Steadfast, Earth's oldest orbital defense cruiser. The ship was 30 years old, built before humanity had ever encountered alien life. Its weapons were outdated. Its shields were weak. Against the Velthari fleet, it was like a wooden boat facing a hurricane. "Captain," his second officer said, her voice trembling, "the enemy fleet is charging weapons. They will fire in 60 seconds. Taiwu was 53 years old. He had served in Earth's Space Navy for 30 years. He had a wife waiting for him in Busan and 2 sons who had just graduated from university. He had planned to retire next year and spend his remaining days fishing. He looked at the enemy fleet on his screen. The Velthari command carrier was the largest ship he had ever seen. It was 10 times the size of his own vessel, bristling with weapons that could destroy cities. "Set course for the command carrier," he said quietly. His crew stared at him. "Sir," the navigation officer asked. "Full speed." "Direct collision course." The crew understood. They had all known this moment might come. Slowly, one by one, they turned back to their stations and began to work. The Steadfast accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Warning signals screamed. The Velthari opened fire, but Taiwu's pilots were skilled. They dodged and weaved through the barrage, taking damage but never stopping. 30 seconds to impact, the navigation officer reported. Taiwu opened a channel to all Earth forces. "This is Captain Yoon Taiwu of the Steadfast. I am about to ram the enemy command carrier. Watch carefully. See how they burn? Then remember they bleed too." The Steadfast struck the command carrier at full speed. The explosion lit up the sky like a new sun. 11 Velthari ships were destroyed in the blast. The command carrier lost its main weapons array and half its crew in the last moment before impact. Taiyu ejected in an escape pod. He would live to fight again. On Earth, soldiers watched the explosion through their screens and cameras. A single human ship had just damaged the mightiest vessel in the Velthari fleet. It was not a victory, but it was something else. It was proof that the enemy could be hurt. The Velthari responded with fury. Thousands of dropships descended on Earth like angry rain. Ground troops poured out 8 feet tall, covered in living metal armor that healed itself when damaged. They had trained for 1,000 years. They had conquered 17 worlds. They expected the humans to run. In Seoul, Sergeant Choi Na-ri watched the enemy soldiers march through the burning streets. She was 28 years old, with a scar across her left cheek from a training accident. Her squad was 12 soldiers. All of them scared, all of them ready. Remember your training, she told them. Hit them fast. Hit them hard. Then disappear before they can react. The Velthari squad moved down the main street, confident and unhurried. They had already killed hundreds of humans. The resistance was weak. These creatures were soft and fragile. They died so easily. Nari's squad attacked from 3 directions at once. Bullets struck the Velthari armor. Most bounced off. But some found the gaps, the joints, the neck seals, the eye slots. 3 Velthari soldiers fell. The others turned to fight. But Nari's squad was already gone, vanishing into the ruined buildings like ghosts. The Velthari commander was confused. No species had ever attacked like this. They always stood and fought in the open, where Velthari's superior firepower would destroy them. These humans fought like shadows. Across the city, similar scenes played out. Small groups of humans attacked and retreated, attacked and retreated. They used every trick they had learned in centuries of fighting each other, ambushes, traps, misdirection. The Velthari had expected a simple conquest. Instead, they had stumbled into a nightmare. In the subway tunnels beneath the city, Dr. Beek Somi worked without rest. She was 60 years old, a retired veterinarian who had never treated a human patient in her life. Now she was operating on wounded soldiers with kitchen tools and animal medicine. "This is all we have, doctor." Somi looked at the dozens of wounded soldiers lying in the tunnel. Many would die. She knew that. But she would save as many as she could. "Then we will make it enough," she said. By the end of the first day, the Velthari had killed 200,000 humans. They had captured 3 major cities. By all measures, they were winning. But something was wrong. The humans were not surrendering. They were not running. Even civilians were fighting, throwing rocks, setting fires, sabotaging equipment. Old men and young children were carrying ammunition to the front lines. Women who had never held a weapon in their lives were learning to shoot in the countryside. A 19-year-old private named Kong Du-yan hid in a farmhouse and watched a Velthari walker approach. The machine was 40 feet tall, armed with weapons that could level buildings. His rifle was useless against it. But Doyen had an idea. He took the explosives from his pack and attached them to a delivery drone he had found in a store. It was a simple device meant for carrying packages. He programmed it to fly straight up and then dive down. The drone rose into the air. The walker did not notice it. Why would it? The machine was designed to fight armies, not toys. The drone dove into the walker's main sensor cluster and exploded. The walker stumbled, blind. Its weapons fired wildly. Then it collapsed. It's crashing through a building and crushing a squad of Velthari soldiers beneath it. Doyen ran before the enemy could find him. He had just destroyed a war machine worth more than his entire village using spare parts and farm equipment. In the Galactic Council, Elderbin watched the reports with growing confusion. The humans had lost 200,000 people. They should be broken. They should be begging for mercy. Instead, they were adapting. Every hour, they found new ways to fight. They used their cities as weapons, collapsing buildings on enemy troops. They used their vehicles as bombs. They used their own bodies as shields. The Council's computer ran new calculations. Revise. Prediction. Total human defeat. Estimated time, 96 standard hours. Elderben stared at the numbers. The prediction had changed. In 9,000 years, he had never seen the computer adjust its estimate after a war had begun. Something unprecedented was happening on that little blue planet, and for the first time in centuries, the ancient elder felt something he had almost forgotten: curiosity. By the 5th day, the humans should have been dead. The Galactic Council's computer had predicted their extinction 3 times now. Each time, the humans had refused to follow the prediction. They kept fighting. They kept dying. And somehow, impossibly, they kept learning. Commander Park Geo had not slept in 5 days. Her eyes were red and her hands shook when she held her coffee cup. But her mind was sharp. It had to be. The survival of her entire species depended on it. She stood in the underground command center, surrounded by screens showing battles across the globe. The news was bad. Millions were dead. Entire cities had been destroyed. The Velthari controlled 30% of Earth's surface. But there was other news. Strange news. Impossible news. Report from the European front, her aide said. Our forces destroyed 40 enemy vehicles yesterday using the new tactics. Asian theater reports successful ambush. 200 enemy soldiers killed. Our losses were minimal. South American resistance captured a Velthari weapons cache. They are distributing the weapons to local fighters. Geo allowed herself a small smile. When the war began, her soldiers had died by the thousands trying to fight the Velthari directly. It was like throwing eggs at a stone wall. But humans were not good at dying. They were good at surviving, so they changed. They stopped fighting the way the Velthari expected. They fought dirty. They fought smart. They used every trick that humans had developed in 10,000 years of killing each other. Guerrilla warfare, urban combat, psychological operations. Sabotage. The Velthari had conquered 17 worlds. But those worlds had all fought the same way. They lined up their armies and faced the enemy in open battle. It was honorable. It was traditional. It was stupid. Humans had no such traditions. They had spent their entire history fighting in mud and shadows. They knew 1,000 ways to kill that the Velthari had never imagined, in a laboratory deep beneath Seoul. Lieutenant Han Wujin worked on a computer that had been running for 3 days straight. He was 32 years old, a thin man with glasses and messy hair. Before the war, he had been a software engineer for a video game company. Now he was trying to find a way to kill aliens. There has to be a weakness, he muttered, watching footage of Velthari ships. No system is perfect. No shield is unbreakable. He had studied hundreds of hours of combat footage. He had analyzed every piece of captured Velthari technology. He had read every report from every battle, and then he saw it. A flicker. So small that no one had noticed. The Velthari shields flickered for exactly 0.003 seconds whenever they cycled power. It happened every 12 seconds. It was invisible to the naked eye, but a computer could see it. Wujin worked through the night. By morning, he had created a targeting program that could detect the flicker and fire at exactly the right moment. He sent it to Commander Park Geo with a simple message: aim for the gaps. Within 48 hours, every weapon on Earth was using his program. Velthari soldiers who had felt invincible suddenly found bullets passing through their shields. Ships that had never been damaged began taking hits. The enemy started to die. Pilot officer. Shinyuna flew her 37th mission on the 6th day of the war. She was 29 years old with short hair and a fierce look in her eyes. She had been shot down twice. She had crashed once. Each time, she found another aircraft and went back up. Her squadron had been reduced from 12 pilots to 3. The others were dead or wounded. But Yuna kept flying. Today, she was hunting a Velthari bomber formation. The enemy ships were heading toward a refugee camp that held 50,000 civilians. If they reached it, everyone would die. I see them, she reported over the radio. 6 bombers. Heavy escort. Yuna, you are outnumbered 8-1, the controller said. Pull back and wait for reinforcements. They will reach the camp in 4 minutes. She pushed her throttle forward and dove toward the enemy. Her targeting computer locked onto the first bomber. She fired, the Velthary shields flickered. Her missiles passed through and struck true. The bomber exploded. The enemy fighters turned toward her. Una twisted and rolled, dodging their fire. She was not as fast as them. Her weapons were not as strong, but she had something they did not have. She had something to protect. She thought about her daughter, Minji, who was hiding in a shelter somewhere in the south. She thought about the promise she had made that she would come home. She could not break that promise, so she could not die. Una destroyed 3 more bombers before her aircraft was hit. The engine failed. Fire spread across her wing. She ejected and watched her ship spiral down toward the ocean. The remaining bombers turned back. Without their escorts, they were vulnerable. They would not reach the camp. 50,000 people would live because one pilot refused to give up. In the council chamber, Elderbin watched the battle reports with growing amazement. The humans were losing. That was clear. They had lost millions. They would lose millions more. But they were not losing the way the computer had predicted. They were learning too fast. How is this possible? Asked a council member from the Dreth Collective. They are a primitive species. They should not be able to adapt this quickly. Elderbin thought about the question carefully. He had studied many species over his long life. He had seen civilizations rise and fall. He had watched races evolve over thousands of years, but he had never seen anything like this. I believe, he said slowly, that we have made an error. We calculated their strength based on their technology, their numbers, their resources. But we forgot to account for something else. What? Their nature. Elderbin brought up images of human history. Wars, plagues, disasters, and always the survivors. These creatures have spent their entire existence fighting for survival. They have faced extinction many times and have always found a way to continue. They do not know how to surrender because they have never learned. It is not in their nature. The council was silent. Wait. What are you saying? The Dreth member asked. Elderbin looked at the little blue planet on the display. The humans were still fighting. They were still dying, but they were still there. I am saying, he replied, that we may have made a terrible mistake. He requested a new calculation from the computer. The numbers processed for a long moment. Then the result appeared. Revised prediction, outcome uncertain. For the first time in its history, the great computer of the Galactic Council did not know who would win. Day 12. The war that should have ended in 3 days was still being fought. Admiral Dero stood on the bridge of his new command ship and tried to understand what had gone wrong. His fleet had been reduced by 40%. His ground forces were trapped in 100 different battles across the human planet. His soldiers, who had conquered 17 worlds without fear, were now afraid to enter human cities. Port, he ordered. His aides stepped forward. We have lost another 12 ships overnight. The humans have begun using our own weapons against us. They captured the armory at Grid 7 and distributed the contents to their fighters. How many soldiers did we lose on the ground? 8,000 confirmed dead? Another 5,000 missing. Missing. It meant the humans had taken them. Koro did not want to think about what happened to captured Velthary soldiers. The humans had learned quickly that information was as valuable as weapons. This is impossible, Koro said. They are primitives. They should have surrendered days ago. But the humans had not surrendered. They had not even asked for terms. They just kept fighting with a stubbornness that defied all logic. In a small city in the south of the Korean peninsula, Corporal Moon Hanyul lay in a pile of rubble and watched the enemy approach. He was 24 years old, covered in dust and blood. Exhausted beyond anything he had ever felt before, his squad had been ordered to hold the bridge behind him. The bridge connected 2 parts of the city and was the only way for civilians to escape to the evacuation zone. If the Velthary crossed it, 50,000 people would be trapped. The squad had started with 12 soldiers. After 9 hours of fighting, only Hanyul was left. He counted the enemy soldiers approaching. 400, maybe more. They moved carefully now, checking every shadow for humans. They had learned to be afraid. Haniel smiled. Good, he raised his rifle and fired. A Velthari soldier fell. The others scattered, taking cover. They returned fire, but Haniel had already moved, crawling through the ruins to a new position. He fired again. Another enemy fell. For 9 hours, Haniel fought alone. He used every trick he knew. He set traps with broken glass and electrical wire. He collapsed walls onto enemy squads. He started fires to create confusion. He made the Velthari believe they were facing a much larger force. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found him standing in the middle of the bridge, wounded in 6 places, surrounded by enemy bodies. The Velthari had retreated. Corporal, the relief commander said in amazement, "How did you hold them off?" Haniel looked at the bridge behind him. The bridge that was still standing? The bridge that 50,000 people had used to escape? They wanted the bridge, he said simply. Then he collapsed. News of the battle spread across Earth and beyond. The humans had a new hero. But more importantly, they had proof that even one person could make a difference. The galaxy was watching now. In the council chamber, representatives from dozens of worlds discussed the war in hushed voices. The Velthari Empire had been the most powerful force in the galaxy for centuries. No one had dared to challenge them. But now, a primitive species on a small planet was doing exactly that and winning. This cannot be allowed to continue, said the representative from the Coal Dominion, a Velthari ally. If the humans defeat the Empire, it will upset the entire balance of power. Perhaps the balance needs to be upset, replied Ambassador Rin of the Rithani Collective. The Rithani had been enemies of the Velthari for 1,000 years. The Empire has bullied the galaxy for too long. You would support these humans, would support anyone who fights against tyranny. That night, the first Rithani supply ships arrived at the edge of human space. They carried weapons, medicine, and food. They carried something else too, hope. Other species followed. Un Federation, an ancient race of scholars, opened their archives and shared everything they knew about Velthari weaknesses. The Myra Trading League, officially neutral, began secretly routing supplies to Earth, even the mysterious Pale Ones, who had not spoken to any other species in centuries, sent a single message. We are watching. Do not fail. Commander Park Geo received the supplies with tears in her eyes. For the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to believe that victory was possible. She gathered her commanders and presented her plan. She called it Operation Sunrise. The Velthari expect us to keep fighting defensively, she explained. They expect us to hide in our cities and wait for them to come to us. We will do the opposite. We will attack. The room was silent. Attack? With what? The human fleet had been nearly destroyed. The army was exhausted. How could they possibly go on the offensive? Geo showed them the plan. It was based on every tactic humans had ever used in war. Ancient strategies from generals who had died thousands of years ago, naval maneuvers from battles fought on water, not space. Psychological warfare techniques refined over centuries of human conflict. The Velthari have fought many species, Geo said, but they have never fought a species that has spent its entire existence at war with itself. We know every way there is to destroy an enemy because we have used them all on each other. Now we will use them on them. On day 18, Operation Sunrise began. Human forces attacked simultaneously across the globe. Not in large armies, but in thousands of small groups, striking targets and disappearing before the enemy could respond. They attacked supply lines. They destroyed communication centers. They assassinated officers. The Velthari command structure, designed for traditional warfare, could not keep up. Orders were lost. Units were isolated. Reinforcements arrived too late. In space, the rebuilt human fleet used tactics from ancient naval battles. They formed lines and broke through enemy formations. They used small ships as shields for larger ones. They rammed enemy vessels and boarded them, fighting hand-to-hand in the corridors. The Velthari had never faced anything like it. They had conquered worlds that fought with logic and order. The humans fought with chaos and fury. There was no pattern to their attacks, no strategy that the Velthari computers could predict. By day 20, the humans were no longer just surviving. They were winning. Admiral Quaro watched his empire crumble around him and could not understand how this had happened. He had commanded the greatest fleet in the galaxy. He had faced enemies that had existed for 10,000 years. He had never lost until now, until the humans. "Order the retreat," he said quietly. It was the first time in his life he had spoken those words. His officers stared at him in shock. "We are leaving," Quaro repeated. "This war is over." As the Velthari fleet began to pull back, abandoning the planet they had come to conquer. They had arrived expecting an easy victory. They were leaving in defeat. In the command center on Earth, Commander Park Geo watched the enemy retreat and allowed herself to cry. Around her, officers cheered and embraced each other. They had done the impossible, but Geo knew the war was not truly over. The Velthari would be back. And next time, they would not underestimate humanity. She needed to make sure the galaxy never made that mistake again. Day 23. The war was over. Admiral Quaro's flagship burned in Earth's orbit, torn apart by human weapons and human rage. The great warship that had conquered 17 worlds was now nothing but twisted metal and fire. Escape pods scattered in every direction as the surviving crew fled. The rest of the Velthari fleet was gone. It retreated beyond the asteroid belt, then beyond the edge of the solar system, then out of human space entirely. They had come to destroy a civilization, had barely escaped with their lives. On Earth, the silence was strange. For 23 days, there had been nothing but war. Explosions, gunfire, screaming. Now there was quiet. People emerged from shelters and looked up at the sky where enemy ships had once gathered. The ships were gone. In cities across the planet, humans began to understand what had happened. They had won, against all odds, against every prediction, against the most powerful military force in the galaxy. They had won. The celebrations lasted for days. Commander Park Geo did not celebrate. She had too much work to do. The war was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Millions of people were dead. Cities were destroyed. The planet would take years to rebuild, and the galaxy was watching. On the 25th day, she received a message from the Galactic Council. D requested that a human representative address them. For the first time in history, humanity had been invited to speak before the rulers of the galaxy. Geo knew this was a trap. The Council had predicted human extinction. They had watched the war without interfering, waiting for the Velthari to finish their conquest. Now they wanted to see this strange species that had defied their predictions. She went anyway. The journey to the Council station took 3 days. Geo spent the time preparing her speech. She knew that every word would matter. The fate of her entire species might depend on what she said. When she arrived at the Great Hall, she was surprised by the silence. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in their floating chairs, all of them watching her. Some looked curious. Others looked afraid. A few looked hostile. She walked to the center of the hall, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Her uniform was torn in several places. The scar on her face, given to her during the battle for Sol, was still fresh. She had refused to change into something more formal. She wanted them to see what war looked like. Elder, been activated as recording device. This moment would be remembered for thousands of years, no matter what happened next. "You may speak human," he said. Geo looked around the hall. So many aliens. So many species she had never seen before. They had all watched her people die and had done nothing. "You gave us 72 hours, she said. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "Your computer calculated our defeat. Your council recorded our extinction. You sat here in your comfortable chairs and watched as we fought for our lives. No one spoke. No one moved. You measured our ships," Geo continued. "You counted our weapons. You analyzed our numbers and our resources. And based on those measurements, you decided that we would lose." She paused. "But you forgot to measure something else." She touched the scar on her face. "You forgot to measure our hearts." She took a step forward, and several council members actually leaned back in their chairs. This small, soft creature, so fragile compared to the armored giants of the galaxy, somehow seemed dangerous. "We are humans. We have crawled through ice ages that froze our world. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have fought each other in wars that destroyed nations. And every single time when the universe told us to die, we refused." Her voice rose, filling the hall. "We do not know how to surrender. We have never learned. Our ancestors faced death every single day, and they survived through pure stubbornness. That stubbornness is in our blood. It is in our bones. It is who we are." She turned in a slow circle, meeting the eyes of every representative who would look at her. "You think we won because we were lucky? You think this was an accident, a mistake in your calculations? But it was not. We won because we are humans, and humans do not accept defeat. We do not believe in impossible odds. We simply have not read the statistics." The hall was completely silent. "I am not here to threaten you," Geo said, her voice softening slightly. "We do not seek revenge. We do not want to conquer your worlds or destroy your civilizations. That is not who we are either." She took a breath. "But I am here to warn you. We will defend ourselves. We will protect our people. And if any species, any empire, any force in this galaxy ever threatens our home again, we will fight with everything we have. We will never stop. We will never give up. We will make you regret the day you pointed a weapon at Earth." She straightened her torn uniform with quiet dignity. "That is all I have to say." She turned and walked out of the hall. No one tried to stop her. After she left, the council was silent for a long time. Then Elder Ben spoke. "I've lived for 9,000 years, he said. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species evolve and die. I thought I had seen everything that the galaxy could offer." He looked at the door through which the human had departed. "I was wrong." The council voted on how to classify humanity. Some wanted them labeled as a threat to be contained. Others wanted them declared enemies of galactic peace. The Velthari representatives, still reeling from their defeat, demanded that the council punish the humans for their victory. The debate lasted for 7 hours. In the end, Elder Ben proposed a compromise. It was a simple classification, just 3 words. But those words would define humanity's place in the galaxy. For centuries to come, the vote was nearly unanimous. Classification. Do not engage. News of the classification spread across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly wanted to know everything about them. The Velthari Empire, humiliated by their defeat, withdrew from galactic politics. The balance of power that had existed for centuries began to shift, and on Earth, humanity began to rebuild. Commander Park Geo returned home to find her country in ruins, but her people alive. She had done what she'd promised. She had protected them. In Seoul, Sergeant Choi Nari helped clear rubble from destroyed buildings. In a laboratory, Lieutenant Han Woojin worked on new defensive systems. In a hospital, Dr. Beek Somi treated patients with the same dedication she had shown during the war. In the sky above, Pilot Officer Shin Yuna flew patrol missions, watching for threats that might never come, and on a small farm in the countryside, Private Kong Doyon planted seeds in soil that had been scorched by alien weapons. The earth was damaged, but it was not dead. With time and care, things would grow again. That was the human way. Always had been. Always would be. Years later, when other species visited Earth, they were often surprised by what they found. They expected a military fortress, a planet covered in weapons and soldiers. Instead, they found parks and gardens, schools and hospitals, cities rebuilt more beautiful than before. The humans had not used their victory to conquer others. They had used it to heal themselves, but the visitors also noticed something else. In every city, there were monuments to those who had died in the war, names carved in stone, flames that burned forever. The humans had not forgotten what had happened, and they never would. Elderben lived for another 1,000 years. In that time, he watched humanity spread across the stars. They joined the Galactic Council. They formed alliances. They explored distant worlds and discovered new wonders, but they never forgot the lesson. They had learned during those 23 days, and neither did anyone else. Never tell a human they cannot win. Never assume they will surrender. Never underestimate their stubborn, furious, it's impossible will to survive. Because humans do not believe in defeat, they just have not learned how to lose.